Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us in today's panel webinar, Continuing to Work from Home Amidst COVID-19. My name is Yusra Benjeloun, Administrative Coordinator and Project Manager with the Work Wellness Institute, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. We would like to thank our academic team and our 9 founding partner organizations in the Harnessing Talent project. Harnessing Talent Alliance for Recruiting and Retaining Canadians with Disabilities and Mental Health Challenges is a 3-year project funded by Employment and Social Development Canada. This webinar is made possible through the support of ESDC as well as donations and memberships to WWI. We thank our advisory committee and speakers who contribute to this webinar series. While we're waiting for others to join us, I'll go over a few technical points for the webinar. You should be able to hear the presentation through your computer speakers or through the conference call line if you dialed in. Please use the question box to submit any issues you may be experiencing, any comments you may have, and any questions related to the webinar. We will collect questions submitted throughout the webinar and follow it with a Q&A based on the questions submitted. A reminder for members, if you are a WWI or VRA Canada member, you receive free certificates of attendance. Following the webinar, any questions not answered in the allotted time will be answered and distributed after the event. The presentation will be recorded and posted for free on our website along with the slides. You will be emailed the direct links for all of these items when they're available. We're very excited to welcome Dr. Kevin Kellaway, Mr. Manu Nelutla, and Dr. Aladay. Kevin Kellaway is the Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Occupational Health Psychology and a Professor of Organizational Psychology at St. Mary's University in Halifax. His research focuses on issues related to organizational leadership, mental health in the workplace, and occupational health psychology. And he has published over 200 articles and book chapters and 14 books dealing with these issues. Manu Nelutla is the Executive Director at ActSafe Safety Association. He's a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist and a CMHA Certified Psychological Health and Safety Advisor. He has postgraduate degrees in physiotherapy, education ergonomics with specialization in human factors and business administration. Aladay is a professor of occupational health psychology at St. Marie University, and she is the director of CN Center for Occupational Health and Safety. She's a fellow of the Canadian Psychological Association, and she was a Canada Research Chair for 10 years. Both her research and consulting work focus on supporting worker health and functioning by developing and validating effective organizational and individual programs that address inclusive leadership, healthy workplaces, workplace respect and civility, employee well-being, disability, and work-life balance. If you would like to know more about our expert, please visit our website, and I will turn it to Kevin.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's ironic as I look at the backgrounds, we're talking about working from home, and of course, we're all working from home. So Manu and I have agreed that if there are not enough questions to fill the question period, we are going to pull out our guitars and sing to you. So that should be sufficient threat for you to generate questions as we go along. I'll just put my slides up now. So I'm part of a consortium of researchers that has been looking at sort of how organizations have responded through the pandemic. And we're looking at a whole variety of issues, including, you know, how traditional workplaces have changed, but most strikingly has been this rapid change to work-at-home arrangements. So it's a project that's funded by, that should be CIHR, not CIRH, the Canadian Institute for Health Research, as well as funding from the New Brunswick and Nova Scotia research organizations, and from the David Sobey Center for Innovation Retail Services. So as I said, we're focused on employee experiences through the pandemic and how organizational responses, the way organizations have communicated, the policies they've implemented, have affected employees. And we have a website for that project, and there's a list there of my collaborators, Dr. Jen Dimhoff at University of Ottawa, and Dr. Stephanie Gilbert at Cape Breton University, and Dr. Jane Mullen at Mount A. as well as our research team who do all the work, Rachel, Vanessa, Jacqueline, and Tabitha. So with that brief summary aside, so one of the things we've been looking at, as I said, is work at home arrangements. And maybe we can start with the first poll question I have, which is just asking you about your work arrangements, asking how many are working at home and how many are in their workplace, and whether that's changed. And I'm just waiting for the answers to roll in. As the suggested answers indicate, there's a whole, even within that work at home group, there's a wide variety of experiences. Yeah, so about 44% began working from home with the pandemic, and then others are doing it at part-time, and fewer in their own workplace or their original workplace, and some were working at home beforehand. That's actually not a bad representation, because if we look at sort of the distributions we're seeing across the country, what we're generally getting is about 40% of the Canadian workforce now working from home. That's about 5 million people. But pre-pandemic, it was still around 11, 12%, somewhere in that neighborhood. So there's been a dramatic increase in the number working from home, but it's not the case that it's totally unknown to us. People were working at home prior to the pandemic. And really what's changed is the extent of working at home. What's changed is who is working at home, because prior to the pandemic, working at home was common among the self-employed, for example, or for people who did some kind of jobs like consulting or things like that. But in many organizations, it was a sort of a perk to be able to work at home. And now it's mandatory for everybody. So certainly the extent of work at home has changed. And the other thing that has changed and continues to change is originally that transition was very sudden. So I know in my university, within about a week, everybody was suddenly working at home. There's no on-campus activities. And then we had a totally transition to the virtual workforce. So it was a mad scramble for those first couple of months. And I think a lot of that has settled down for people in the sense that they've worked out their working arrangements, and hopefully we're not still curled up on the couch with a laptop sort of thing, and we've gotten some better work arrangements at home. I know Manu's going to talk about that. And again, when we look at the data for all those people who are now working at home, I think it's fair to say that the vast majority have found it to be a positive experience. I saw a recent report suggesting 90% or almost 90% of people are saying, yes, I like working at home. I don't particularly want to go back to the workplace. I like this arrangement. And certainly in our research, we're seeing the same thing. The vast majority of people enjoy working at home, or at least compared to the alternative. They revel in the fact that they no longer have the commute. So that's a big aspect for people. Many people, commuting an hour, 2 hours a day. So the fact that they don't have to do that has given them back time. Originally, the big sort of caveat to that was when we first started collecting data, schools were also shut down. So not only were people at home working, but their kids were home too. I saw someone comment on this just the other day who said, there's a reason why we don't have parents bringing their children to work, and we don't have you working at home when your kids are home. There are reasons for this, because these are often incompatible demands. And for many people, that first switch to home, that sort of madness to get everything switched to a new reality, was compounded by the fact that also you were trying to do childcare at the same time as keep up with your duties. At least I know it differs now depending on where you are, but where I am in Nova Scotia, that went away, and kids are back in school on a more or less regular basis for now. I don't know if you can see, I'm just knocking wood just in case. But that aspect seems to be settled down. Where it isn't, it continues to be a problem for people. Most people are telling us they want to continue working from home, at least on a part-time basis. So even those who see some desire to go back to work are typically saying, well, I want to go back, but I don't want to go back 5 days a week. You know, I'd like to work at home 2 days a week and go in 3 days a week, or work at home 3 days and go in 2 days. I'd like to have some contact with the workplace again. And about the only people that we've talked to in our research that really want to come back to work full-time and just can't wait to get back, the typical profile is someone typically younger who's living in a small apartment and they're locked down. So they, you know, going to work was sort of one of their social aspects, and they've lost all of that. So they're anxious to talk to anybody that's not on the other side of a computer screen. But as I said, the vast majority of people are interested in continuing to work at home. And in fact, when you, in its strongest form, you start hearing about that. This is really interesting to me because I'm talking to companies who are saying, oh yes, we're coming back to work, we're coming back as soon as this is all over and the vaccine, we're all vaccinated, we're going back to the old way of doing things. But at the same time, I'm talking to employees who are saying, you know, in the strongest form, if you make me go back, I'll quit. I'll go find a new job. I'm never going back to that 5-day-a-week gig that I used to have. So there's a potential disconnect there that's going to cause some issues, I think, for organizations. So by and large, we can say, you know, is working from home working for people? Is it manageable? Things seem to be going well. And the general answer is yes. As I said, people enjoy working from home. We're not hearing great reports of productivity loss. Recent report from Morneau Chappelle suggested, I think just on 30% of supervisors suggested that employees were not as productive as they used to be, but we're actually hearing the opposite from employees who tell us they're much more efficient, and they're still getting all their stuff done. So we'll see how that shakes out, and it may vary on a lot of things. But the extent to which working at home is working for people depends on a lot of things. It's a lot easier if you have prior experience of doing this. So if you were working at home before the pandemic, working at home during the pandemic is not such an issue. In my own case, like many people who could work from home prior to the pandemic, I have a home office. I have, you know, my desk and computer and everything I need here. That's more or less ergonomically sound, so I can work for a long period of time. I think the only big change I had to make was I actually went into the university and got my chair because the chair I had in my office wasn't good for. It was fine for what I used it for, but it certainly wasn't up to 8-hour days. So it depends on whether you have experience in doing this and you're used to this way of working. It depends on your home setup, and again, I'm not going to say too much about that, but obviously if you're spending your time hunched over an iPad on your sofa, that's going to make for a very long, uncomfortable day. So if you have a better office setup, then it's going to be easier for you. As I mentioned, working at home works for you depending on your family situation, and particularly if you have children or dependents whom you provide care for and where they're at. So what's going on with them when you're supposed to be at work? If you're both in the same locale and you're trying to manage both of those things at once, that's well, that is the definition of work-family conflict, and that's going to cause problems for you. And that is heavily gender-based. I know that men are now more involved in childcare than they used to be, but the burden of that managing childcare and work at the same time seems to have largely fallen on women in our current work-at-home arrangement. So it's both gender and family situation based. How it's working also depends on your company policies and organizations. So we've talked to some companies, for example, who have employees spread across different locations that prior to the pandemic rarely communicated. The employees in Halifax didn't talk to the employees in Toronto or the employees in Montreal on a very regular basis. And they're telling us now this has actually gotten better. That communication between those different branches is much better because now we're all used to using Zoom, and a teleconference is not a big thing. So we're all using Zoom or GoToMeeting or Teams or whatever. And because we're all used to it, it's become like picking up the phone. So communication may have been enhanced for some companies. Other companies, we haven't been able to find anybody doing this, so I have no data on it, but we're hearing stories about companies that are putting on logging software onto your computers or some kind of monitoring software to monitor employees. And I suspect that will have negative effects as you go on. And of course, I'll speak a bit more about this. How it's working also depends on your supervisor and how they're handling supervision in this sort of new environment. So I talked a bit about some of these, but some of the things I think we have to watch with work-at-home arrangements is employees are generally telling us they're much more efficient than they used to be. Interestingly, they tell us they're more efficient, but then when you say, what do you miss about being at work? It's overwhelmingly, it's the social interaction. And of course, that's why we're more efficient, because we don't have that to take us away from our work. So you can get a lot more done at home in a shorter period of time because you're not interacting with a bunch of people and they're not coming into your office. So there's a trade-off for that. And as I mentioned, there are some different perspectives there. Employees are generally telling us they're just as productive as they ever were, and maybe more so. Supervisors, at least a substantial minority, seem to be saying something different. There's changes, I think, to organizational culture that we have to think about, because this has been a dramatic change to the way we organize work and the way we do things. And by definition, that's what culture is, and how we interact and the tools we use to interact and all of that sort of stuff. So all that's changing, and we're still watching to see how that's going to sort out and whether organizations can maintain their sort of unique culture or what it is that makes them successful in this new environment. And then morale, engagement, and stress, all of those sort of issues of just about how employees are feeling, maybe a little harder to assess remotely because you don't see people on a regular basis, so harder to get a read on whether people are still happy with their work or whether they're under a lot of stress. And there are some, I'm hearing rumblings of people being concerned about employees sort of becoming less engaged in the organization, that they're sort of drifting away, becoming almost independent contractors. So I have a second poll question, very quickly, just asking what you would like to do after the pandemic. What's your preference? Would you like to return to the workplace full-time? Would you like to go back to the workplace part-time? And by part-time, I mean a couple of days in the office and a couple of days at home. I don't mean going to part-time work. Would you like to continue to work from home full-time? So we'll just wait for the responses to roll in there. Yeah, so this is basically what we're finding in our data too, is people are saying, I want to go back to the workplace, but I don't want to go back on a full-time basis. And you see that's a minority in our poll, but it's a minority in our data as well. There are some people saying that for sure, for whatever reason, they'd like to get back to work, but most people are saying, no, I'm done. I want to stay at home now. I want to keep working. I'd like the option to go in a couple of days a week, but I don't need to be there all the time. It's very consistent with what we're seeing. I just want to end today briefly by talking about leaders in organizations, and it's an area of research we're just getting into now. Leaders are really in a double bind because they're in a position of being responsible to make all this work and to maintain the function of the organization, but at the same time they're experiencing all the same effects. They had to make a rapid transition to being at home. They may be isolated at home or feeling cut off for things. So the same things that employees are experiencing, leaders are experiencing. We've been doing some work on what leaders can do to make things better for employees, and we use the acronym Cyber Leadership. Arla and I have a competition to come up with the best acronyms. I think she wins mostly, but I like this one. So largely based on research pre-pandemic, we know it's important for leaders to check in with employees on a regular basis, not just on work stuff, but how's it going, how are you doing? And these are the kind of conversations we would normally have in the hallway of wherever you work, or at the water cooler, the lunchroom, something like that. And now we don't have that. So we're still doing the formal stuff. We need to do the informal stuff as well. We know that leaders still have a motivational role, and you can do a lot over email or by Zoom or Teams to keep people sort of feeling good about what they're doing and point out the challenges they're meeting. We also talk about boasting in the sense of telling other people. It's a great ego boost if somebody is saying to their boss what a great job you're doing. So not boasting about your own accomplishments, but the accomplishments of your team. We can do a lot with technology to keep people engaged, to solicit their opinions and get them involved in decision making. And of course, we can do a lot to recognize just how much employees have done and continue to do to keep the work flowing under these situations. So that's the sort of model we're working with now with leaders, with the idea that these are things that we need to be engaging in fairly regularly to keep the workforce motivated and involved in the organization. So that's what I have to say today, and I'm anxious to hear what Manu has to say, because I suspect my workstation is not as good as it should be. So what do I have to do?
Well, thanks, Kevin. We will definitely look at how your workstation is looking afterwards, definitely. But I hope this presentation will help you out to do a self-evaluation, quick self-evaluation. Hello, everyone. And yeah, I mean, wonderful information there, Kevin. Thank you. I mean, as a leader myself, leading my organization, that information is very important for me too. So I look forward to connecting and with my team and see how that evolves over time. So definitely it's an interesting times for organizations like ours. So thanks for that. And yeah, I mean, as we're continuously working from home, one of the most important thing is that everybody talks about, and I think it's one of the, after COVID and other work from home solutions, mental health, I think ergonomics is another term that is being normally used during this time, because everybody's stuck to their whatever workstation you can call it, whether it's a good desk or it's a kitchen island, right? So, or on the couch. So I'm here to propose few of the tips, and we'll see how that can work. And again, as you saw my tagline there, how your habits unfold, and one day at a time. So, you know, like it will slowly improve. So I have a question for everyone here too. Like, how many of you are still working in those positions? It's been 10 months now. I would assume that we have been in this situation. I remember mid-March is when we started going into lockdown and work from home. So I I don't know how many of you are still there, but if you're still in this position, I think it's definitely time to make some modifications. And as an employer, they have some obligations and responsibility to make sure that your efficiency and your productivity is up to the mark, and how they can support, and you individually also how you can participate in making those smaller or little modifications. So if you're still using in some of these things, some of the modifications which you may have already done or maybe still doing is put some books under the laptop, like especially with all the Zoom meetings that you're having and etc. It's better to have at your eye level, so that your webcam and your monitor is at your eye level. Look at me right now, I'm looking straight at you guys at the eye level. Kevin, no comments there, but yeah. It's all about how we can look at making small modifications, and that's all we are looking at here, is that how to maximize the workstation that you're working at this moment. Look at myself. I mean, this is myself in March, end of March, sitting at my island. That was my workstation for some days because we were all in lockdown. I just came from Hawaii during the spring break, and so I had to quarantine myself and my family, so I couldn't even go to the office to get my laptop. Luckily, I had an iPad, so I was able to work through this time at my kitchen island. But one modification I did was, you can see in the next picture, I was at least standing in between and trying to work. So again, as an ergonomist myself, I would be not very happy with my neck position there, but hey, at least I'm standing and moving between my at my workstation. So this is what I'm talking about, modifications. If you are still in those older positions of like earlier positions of sitting on a couch or at your kitchen island, make minor modifications so that it helps you out to move away from that particular position. So I have a poll here. Yusra, if you can please go through the poll there. Thank you. Okay, so what do you think is there? Like, what do you think works for you guys? Like, what do you think is the most important thing out there, according to you? Is it a monitor, computer accessories? Is it taking breaks? Is it a keyboard, like keyboard accessories, or sit to stand desk? What is the what do you think is among the following is the most important thing for you? I'll wait for your answers to pop up out there.
So it shows that the majority think that the most important ergonomically while working from home, is a good posture with 47%. 24% think breaks, so response answer C. Next one is 18% think B, ergonomic chair. And then we have a small 6% for both a response A and E, so sit to stand desk and computer accessories such as keyboard, monitor, etc.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. If I can get back to my screen here. That's perfect there. I mean, I'm glad that most of you have spoken that posture is most important. Yes, absolutely. Posture is the most important thing out there, because I was curious if anybody would go for the chair, which I see just around a quarter of you, or around 18% of you still say chair, which is good. I mean, it's important to have a good ergonomic chair, as Kevin mentioned that he had to go to university to get a good chair. But I'm also glad to see that you're talking about posture and breaks, because those are the most important things too, according to me. Because you may have a good ergonomic chair, but if you're comfortable in the chair, you're not moving at all, that's not going to help us. And if you're having a good ergonomic chair, but the table height doesn't work out with your chair armrests and etc., then you're taking a bad posture. Or if the monitor is away from you, then you're actually stooping forward to look into your monitor. So I think I'm very excited to see that it's posture and taking breaks is important, because if you're sitting in the chair for like 2-3 hours, you're taking away the benefits of having an ergonomic chair and actually creating more issues while sitting in that ergonomic chair. So I think I'm excited to see that the audience also thinks that posture and taking breaks are the most important things. At the same time, I want to remind employers and employees too that making some minor additions, especially in your desk, in your computer accessories and getting your workstation, is important too, like getting a chair. So it's definitely important. But at the same time, few of the things that are important here are getting a laptop stand. How many of you use a laptop stand? Laptop stand is a very easy way to kind of prop up your laptop, so that especially with the Zoom meetings and everything going on, you can have it at the eye level, and the monitor is at the eye level. You have seen my picture where I was using an iPad while sitting at the kitchen island. My neck was totally bent because I was looking down. So getting a laptop stand may help out, and using headphones, a simple tool, especially if somebody who is working from home, who is a receptionist, or who has to work over the phone most of the time at the office, but they are working from home right now. So maybe using a headphone would be much more easier for them. Using a keyboard, most of the time I've seen is that you may have an extra monitor to help you out, which is wonderful, but you're still working with your laptop, which means that the keyboard, you have to still reach out for the keyboard, or the keyboard is laptop is in front of your monitor and you're actually looking at both of them together. So again, it's not very productive and great for you too. So maybe you can think of getting a keyboard, an additional keyboard, and along with the monitor too. So I think these are the minor additions, and I'm telling you, it takes like $200 to $300 to invest, and I think employers should take this advantage of making sure that the employees are provided with this minimal thing. Imagine everybody is at the office and having coffee and snacks. Hey, that's cost is minimized right now. So maybe you invest in some making some minor additions through these accessories too, and where possible. Try to get a sit to stand desk where possible too. I mean, that will enhance the value of and constantly remind people to get up and move from that sitting to standing position and standing to sitting position. But at the same time, I want to remind you that just having these things doesn't mean that they are important. As I totally agree with your poll, which says 6% of them have agreed with some computer accessories there, and that's the reason, because these are minor additions which will enhance the productivity, but at the same time, you still need to move and stretch in between. So my own workstation evaluation, Kevin was telling how people have evolved in the past few months into their mindset on whether going back to work or not. At the same time, our workstations have become the places where we thought it would be for 2 months, and then, oh, it's just 3 more months, and then vaccine is here, maybe we will get back. No, it's going to be some time right now, but it's my own workstation evolved, and that's what I want to share here with you all, to say that that's how you need to keep adding on. So my first workstation was that on a kitchen island, and then I was able to get my laptop from office then and I had a temporary table there with a temporary chair, whatever I could manage with, and there you go. And next I could invest slowly in a desk, and I got my ergonomics chair, just as Kevin got his chair from his workplace. I could get my chair, and you could see the addition of a monitor and the laptop stand. So it enhanced slowly. It's not saying that it has to be done or immediately, but it evolved over time too. We were able to realize, and this is what we have been encouraging our employees to at our organization too. You want a monitor, you want a headphone set, you want something, a keyboard, ask us, and we'll be able to provide you to make it much more easier for you. This is how it looks right now. You can see the window. So this is exactly right now. This is my latest workstation. I also was able to get the sit to stand desk that we had at my office, so that I can even use that. So it evolves over time, and ergonomics is not about you have to do it the right time at the first time. It's what works for you, what doesn't work for you. It's all about analyzing your postures, because just getting a chair or getting a monitor doesn't mean that it is solved, because more importantly, you need to keep moving. You need to keep moving around. So some of the tips I would like to present here is, Sitting constantly in one position may cause stress to some body parts. So change position often to minimize this stress. So even if you have an ergonomics chair, or if you're sitting on the couch, move, change positions. Even if you're standing, even if I'm standing here using my sit to stand desk, I'm trying to move around, and so that I can be I can get the blood flow move in my muscles and etc. So that you're not stressing your body parts. So please change positions. Remember to take micro breaks. I'm happy that a quarter of you have said breaks is important, but more than breaks, I would say micro breaks frequently, because break is like you would like to take a 15-20 minute break. Wonderful. If you can get it, go for it. But micro breaks is something I would always say. And when I say micro breaks are like for every 20 minutes of work or so, take a 20-second break. Don't wait for a full 1 hour to go on and then you take a break, because that way you're already compounding the stress that is already on your body for 1 more hour. So where possible, take 20 minutes after 20 minutes work, take a 20-second break and stretch, move around, take a sip of water, etc. So try to do that. And if you're in a meeting, of course, like this conference call or meeting, remember to stretch afterwards so that you're keeping the blood flow going in your muscles. Keep moving from your temporary workstation, work area, whether it's a sit down or a standing workstation. So for example, I'm standing right now, but I'm moving, I'm keeping moving. I'm making sure that I move so that I'm not in the same position. So if Kevin and Arla are sitting at their desk right now, or all of you, try to move, try to just move, turn your neck around, shoulder around, and yeah, just move. Don't be in that one position is what I'm suggesting. Most of you don't forget this. Most of you may forget this, but look away from your computer screen once in a while to rest your eyes. Too much of we have noticed that it's called the Zoom fatigue and etc. More than the meeting fatigue, I think it's the eye looking at your monitor constantly, because the Zoom meeting may be 1 hour or 20-minute catch up or 30-minute catch up over the time of the day, but what is constant is you're continuously looking at the monitor. So I would say look away from your computer screen once in a while to rest your eyes too. I call it 20-20-20 rule. That means after every 20 minutes, take a 20-second break and look away 20 feet away from your screen so that your eyes can get the exercise and they can be moved away from the brightness of your monitors. So please do look away from your computer once in a while and dim the screen brightness to a more comfortable level. Sometimes the outside light, it's dim or it's dark or light, brighter, sunny day, it's too bright. It affects the way your computer, it's going to reflect on your computer screen. How many of you actually adjust the contrast and brightness of your screens? Regularly? No, it's always there, constant. Some of you must have just bought the screen and there you go, whatever settings were there, that's the same setting. So maybe it's a time to check whether what kind of brightness and contrast would actually work well with the current status of your work at this point, and the brightness in the room, lighting, etc. So keep an eye on that screen brightness, and when possible, stay hydrated. I mean, one thing we forget is, yeah, I'm moving, I'm doing everything. Yeah, I'm having coffee or tea, but keep drinking that. Take a sip of water too, keep hydrated whenever you take a micro break. So one more important tip over there. But of all the things, more important, I would say, is that take a micro break. A micro break means, again, as I mentioned, taking a quick 20-30 seconds break after every 20 to 30 minutes of work. So do take a break, stretch, move around, and keep going instead of waiting for that. Oh, let me finish this meeting, 1.5 hour meeting, or this 1.5 hour task or 2 hour task of my desk, and then go take a break. Wonderful, but you're still compounding the stress on your body over that time. So keep moving. So I want to highlight a few things before I change this slide. Change positions, micro breaks, moving. If you're taking notes, these are the words I would like you to take notes of. Rest your eyes, screen brightness, check them regularly, and stay hydrated. So I wanted to highlight all those things. And talking about micro breaks and etc., I know the conference, this panel discussion started at 11 o'clock, and it's almost 40 minutes now. So why don't we take a break, quick micro break, and stretch ourselves. So Yusra, which one do you think we can quickly, which number you would like to select?
We'll go with number 1 if you'd like.
Number 1. Oh yeah,
Easy one.
definitely. I've been watching the camera continuously. So let's do number 1, everyone. Go to the side, to the left, one side. Yes, wonderful. Bend. And then just hold on there for a few seconds. And then slowly, very slowly, turn to the other side. And then wait there for like few seconds. Ah, wonderful. I would like to do number 3. I would like to do number 4, everything. Why not? But what did that do to you guys? Just some blood flow, some fresh air in freshness into the body. And that's all we are talking about. Take breaks. And look at your posture, how you're doing, how are you reaching out, etc. And make sure that you have a good keep moving and stay hydrated. Remember micro breaks and the 20-20-20 rule. So those are some things that we have to continuously think about it while you're working at home, and even if you're going back to office, while you're going back to office to work too. As Kevin mentioned, 70% of them are still interested in that kind of a part-time flexible approach at office and at home. So we still need to remember these tips, whether you're working at the office or at home. And talking about how it all looks at going back to office, or how it all looks, I would hand it over to Arla. I think she has wonderful information moving forward about how that scenarios look around. So yeah, thank you. Thanks, Arla. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Madhu. I'll give you kind of a heads up. So coming in last, I am going to integrate sort of some of the stuff that Kevin was talking about, and a little bit about what Manu was talking about, and really give the perspective in terms of what the realities people are dealing with in terms of work-life balance, leadership, and well-being. And if you are a Drew Carey fan, whose line is it anywhere? Whose line is it anyway? Sorry, is the place where your workspace is totally made up and your pants don't matter. And I'm just going to tie it into the background and looking at the realities of that. And get into a little bit about what can you do and what can leaders do. So whether you're in a leadership role or a non-leadership role, there are things that we can do in the workplace. And then really going back in terms of, is this a back to work situation, or is looking at long-term strategies for remote work? And given the poll that we just had on that, with 76% talking about wanting to go part-time, whether you're in a leadership, formal leadership position or not, this is going to be a reality, I think, for most workplaces. Is how do we look at these long-term strategies? Okay, so moving on from there, we'll have to go into the background, which is looking at healthy workers and workplaces. So Kevin and I came up with a similar model to this that was 15 years ago, and looking at psychologically healthy workplaces. So the whole idea, and Kevin kind of alluded to this too, we've been dealing with remote workers, we've been dealing with how do we keep people healthy at work and the workplace is healthy no matter where they are. The difference right now is that it has come quickly, and it has come to the majority or a lot of workers. So in looking at this, we can focus on different aspects of it. Kevin talked a lot in his cyber model about the recognition aspect of it, about engaging, about inspiring, involving individuals, and we'll go and talk about some of that. And the big thing that we've done in some of our research is looking at the respect piece as well. So how does that tie in? So moving ahead there, when we're looking at one of the key aspects, is that one of the key aspects we're seeing is and again, Kevin alluded to it in his research that they've been doing, is a lot of the aspects in dealing with healthy workplace are that interpersonal aspects. So we know that having supportive leaders, no matter where you're working, is one of the key factors. And the flip side of that is having a toxic leaders is one of the leading reasons why people leave their jobs, is because they don't want to have to deal with that type of relationships. The recognition piece of it and what they can do, and developing that ongoing relationships of respect and trust. The other aspect that we can take from the model is the work-life balance. And the interesting thing I want to always highlight about work-life balance, it gets to be defined by you. Mainly you. You might want to talk to your spouse, your family, and your supervisor a little bit, but how that works for you is going to be an individual thing. So totally different strokes for different folks there. Now, and this is based on Karasak's model of work control. The other thing we know about healthy workers and workplaces is that the amount of control that you have over your work is one of the key components. So if you are in a low control job and if you have high demands, you're going to have high strain. And this is going to lead to, thank you, to some both physical and psychological illness. And if you look at the situation that we're in now with COVID, so we had low control. Nobody had any decision of whether they wanted to work at home or not, right? It happened immediately. And quite frankly, there's nothing you or I can do about that. The high demands were thrown into workspace or work situations, workspace. People didn't have all of the stuff that they needed to do their jobs. Some people who they didn't have their workspaces, as Manu kind of talked about, but they also didn't have some of their work. So as Kevin noted, like in the university, we were kind of kicked out immediately. We scrambling to grab some things, but they didn't want us back in. So it meant you might not have the right files, you might not have the right equipment to do your job, you might not have a lot of things. So, but in doing it, and then our demands were even increased. As one of my colleagues says in teaching, it said like it was twice the work in trying to prep classes and going remotely with half of the enjoyment, and it seemed like half the effectiveness. So there was really that low efficacy aspect that everybody's working hard to try and do their job, and it isn't working for them. And this is one of the key things that we have to look at, is how do we improve on that? Okay. And then, so when some of the realities, and there's a lot more, but in my time, talking a little bit without overlapping too much about the space environment, the interpersonal socialization of some of the realities. And as they say in the real estate business, the three most important things are location, location, and location. Your job, the actual job tasks that you have to do, the resources that you have to do those, and then your work-life balance and integration. So in looking at these, we'll start off with space and environment on the next, and then we can go right into the next one. So one of the realities in terms of space and environment, and both Manu and Kevin alluded to this, is that there's no space or privacy. So, or you can have bad ergonomic workspaces. People were working off of couches, in corners. I had students who were in when we were meeting, they're sitting on the edge of their bed with their laptop trying to do stuff. And it's also the no space privacy. And I've even, as I'm in some meetings and with the people, some of the people I'm at, their partners are in other meetings, and you can hear them, and they're trying to walk through the house and, trying to find a spot that they can kind of, they can get away from everybody. So in terms of the space, and it's, for a lot of people, that has been a challenge. But if we look at some of the positive experiences people have been talking about, some of them have actually said they prefer working at home because their workplace sucks. So they're saying, they don't have the fluorescent lights. They actually have real windows that opened during the summer, and they could have fresh air, and they were able to have plants. And so we have a little bit more control. So that's where we can control what our workplace looks like and how it goes. And I was also going to throw in a gratuitous picture of my dog in there, because that's the other thing, is kind of making home. We know the value of pets and pets at work. And sometimes people have said, like, how many meetings have you had with people and their cats are like wandering around the computer while they're talking? The second aspect is our interpersonal socialization. And looking at these aspects, is that there's no colleagues in socialization. And Kevin talked about that as well, right? What people missed most about it is those water cooler conversations. And it's not even that, it's almost that sense of reality. We're social beings, and we need that that socialization and talking to other human beings in order to kind of make sense of it. And sometimes it is to make sense of our work, to be able to complain about our work or commiserate with each other about our work, or, you know, to have a laugh about life and those types of things. And it can really feel like we're in this hibernation and we don't know what day it is and what we're doing, or if anything we're doing even makes sense. So, and that's, Kevin talked about that feedback that we would normally get from our colleagues and our supervisors. Leaders have to be more explicit about that and step up and say, you know, this is important. Now, what is the maybe more happier aspects of it? Guess what? No colleagues or socialization. So for a lot of my, and Kevin, this is not a comment on you. I just a lot of my colleagues have actually said they love this. They don't feel, and you know, they're very introverted. They feel like they are not pressured into social conversations. They're not interrupted at work. They feel like they can actually focus on that, and they still have the interaction, but it's a much on constrained level. And so they feel that it's actually a positive thing, and they like that. And so we have another aspect of, again, location aspect here. Technology is great. One aspect is, again, if you're working at home, and Kevin was talking about those individuals, you know, who may be younger, they're in, you know, that 600 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment in downtown Toronto. They don't have a break from home. They are there 24/7. And, you know, for a work kind of thing, it all kind of blends, and they don't have that feeling of, you know, wow, it's a Friday and we get to go. The other aspect, and Kevin also alluded to this one in terms of positive, is that there is no commuting. And, you know, so if you're a good old Homer, you know, getting up at 8:59 for your big commute into your spare room for your 9 a.m. start and meeting. And, you know, and that's a reality for a lot of people, that they can be saving. You know, it might only be half an hour a day, but, you know, it could be up to, I know people in Ontario who are commuting 2 hours each way a day. So these individuals now have a different work reality for them. And looking at that, the other thing in a study we did with and looking at accessibility at work, that happened, and it kind of happened around COVID. So at the last minute, we threw in some questions. And this was a study in Canada, the US, and in Scandinavian countries. And the one thing that we found, interestingly, we didn't know if COVID and the changes were going to impact them negatively or positively. And what we found is a lot of people actually said the work from home was good for them. So these were people with both physical and mental health disabilities. And if, again, it was, we figured, we're looking at this in more detail later, but we figured it's aspect of the commuting, where they could set up in home so the accessibility of their work was much easier for them, so it helped them. Okay, so the actual job tasks and resources, if we look at them, and one of the negative things, and again, as Manu talked about, this is your ideal workplace, right? You have this fabulous, you've got your 3 screens, it's an ergonomic desk, and you have the resources to go in it. You have your IT people ready to take your call at any time. You have all of this set up. You don't have technical glitches where you have to rely on Yusra to move the slides for you. It all's working perfectly. And that's not our reality, right? For most of us, we don't have that, and we like to think it's working, but there are a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of different resources that organizations are, some are right on board and supporting their workers, and others are they're a little bit cautious in going in that direction. In terms of the location, there can also, in terms of your tasks and your resources, we'd like to think that perhaps we can increase the autonomy in how you're doing your job and when you're doing your job, even if you have that flexibility. And perhaps you can be creating your own more resources. So those resources that you're able to get the job done better. Okay, and then last but not least, we're going to be looking at work-life balance and integration. So the negative aspects of that, again, you're seeing is this lack of boundaries between work and home. So once you're in this environment, you have you know, where does your workday start? Where does it end? And as Kevin talked about as well, it depends on your type of job, whether you were doing it before, if you're used to that kind of sort of fluidity. And there's another thing aspect of it's the preference. So we study technology as well, and use of technology in terms of work-life balance. And we found that people can have a preference for integration or a preference for segmentation. Some people really like it clear. I start at 9, I end at 5, I have an hour break, and I don't want anything else to kind of go in. Others like it a little bit more fluid. So I did add in that there's no balance without healthy boundaries. And I said, you can see maybe little in there as my quote, yes, but. And you have to be really careful with that, because the second you start imposing those other boundaries on other individuals and saying what's right and wrong, you get into a very paternalistic, taking control away from individuals. So we've seen some issues at organizations in terms of communication, this work line, and saying you are not allowed to contact anybody or send an email after 5 p.m. This may be great for those individuals who are working 9 to 5, but we also have a lot of part-time employees who might be working in the evenings, or we might have families, especially over the summer, who are doing their best trying to deal with young kids, and the times that they could work and send out email was in the evening. So we have to be careful when we're looking at this boundaries that we're not imposing what we think is best on somebody else. And then the flip side of that, if we can click there, is that more integration. So I've, you know, we've heard from workers saying things that they've used this in a way. So one person was saying she in the summer, she was taking walks with her kids at lunch. You know, so again, that's great. We've been trying to get people to exercise more at work for years. We can't do it. So it takes a pandemic and telling them they can't go outside, and then we're getting those individuals actually exercising and spending time. And they also found a way to kind of work around it, saying, you know, that they were able to eat better and have like real meals, and, you know, include the family in doing those things. So some of the positive aspects is how to do that. And as Kevin said, it really depends on your situation. It depends on whether you're a single parent, if you have children at all, whether you have access to care, your socioeconomic status, your type of work, your flexibility of work. But some of these can be important. Okay, so in my last 5 minutes here, I just wanted to round this up and just kind of summarize. So in terms of it, we can see that there's a lot of bad things from it, but there's also ways of leveraging some of the aspects. And if I'm hearing people again saying, you know, we've got like 75% saying they want to continue working from home, I'm assuming there's a lot of this positive aspect that they're wanting to leverage into a greater way. So we can flip through in terms of using our healthy remote work environments instead of workplaces and all our individual. How can we use that and to help create some tips for leaders and for ourselves? So in the next slide, we see that there's several things that leaders can do. So by reducing, the first thing that we can kind of is saying, what is getting in the way of our workers in doing their job and what they need to do their job, what's helping them do that. So minimize sort of unnecessary demands. I know we had some organizations, you know, that were still requiring signatures for things, which meant people had to download, sign, scan, send it off to somebody else and do that. And this wasn't like, you know, classified information. These were regular documents. So they were able to put them online and reduce the paperwork and the unnecessary work for the workload. Lobby for the resources. You know, as Manu said, some of these don't cost a lot, but in organizations' mind, they kind of panic and going, no, we can't spend any money, and people are kind of on their own. So figure out what you need and go from there. also develop supportive guidelines for IC, the information communication technology use and availability. So what does work for your employees? What work, and how can you support them in making sure they aren't overloaded? Because nobody wants to, get the emails from your boss at 8 p.m. on Saturday unless it's an outright emergency. So how do we put in those that create that culture and norms? And then leverage all the good things. So what are your employees liking about it? So provide that support. And as Kevin said, how do you do it? We get the formal stuff, but more informally, talking about that individual team check-ins. How do we do virtual social gatherings so people can have that aspect? Are you sure they know how to access their EFAP, so their Employee and Family Assistant Program? If they need to talk to somebody, because sometimes this is challenging for individuals. Can you allow flexible work hours within that? Encourage new ways of doing their job. Recognize their accomplishment, and that's publicly too, not only to them but to the group. And sometimes, though, recognizing accomplishments individual is just that, you know what, you guys, we made it through the week. We all did this. We got through together, and it's all good. And then engage in that self-care. Be patient and kind. So what can we do for ourselves? So sometimes we create our own chaos. So sometimes we create work demands for ourselves that we don't have to, but we think we need to do. So I think this is in doing that, we kind of think of what is our own doing that maybe we can minimize, and what else can we do? Remove those distractions, really work at it. I know sometimes we just kind of, and I'm the one in this category as well. My work office has moved several times, just depending, because I don't like one room and I wasn't getting good Wi-Fi in it. And so I kind of throw things together. I don't ever sit down, as Moni was saying, and making sure I have all the tools to do my job properly. Provide clear work rules for your family. I hear a lot from parents saying, their kids they just don't get it. And some of it, I'm saying, I think it's just a matter of clarification. Kids at a very young age can understand this is a no entrance kind of thing. For this hour, these are your tasks, and here's how, this is what needs to happen, and develop boundaries that work for you. So what is that situation? Identifying your resources, ask for support. Right? It's not a bad thing to say, I'm struggling with this, either with my technology or with just getting through each day, or whatever I need. Check-in, do check-ins, friends, family, colleagues. Thank your colleagues and supervisors, just like it helps you when you feel better when they thank you, thank them. And then again, we go into self-care and be patient and kind. There. So this is just one of my favorite, Charlie McKessie, it's saying, we talk a lot about self-care in healthy workplaces, and I think some people have been feeling we've been hearing a lot about this in the workplace, and really about that self-care and just taking that next step. So a lot of times we're like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do with this in 4 months? But the thing that's important is just whether we can do that next step. And then the last slide here is or second to last slide, is a lot of times organizations, probably all of our organizations have been saying this, you can't have flexible workplace. We can't have telecommuters. No, you have to do your job here. There's no possible way that your job can be done remotely. And wow, look at that. All of a sudden it found out all these jobs that couldn't be done remotely were getting done remotely. And it might not have been ideal for all of it, but a lot of them, they can. So in looking at organizations, we can talk about back to work strategies, and we can think about that. But I think the more realistic, and we've already talked about, is that there's going to have to be some organizations are going to look at long-term strategies for this remote work. Okay, thank you very much. And so we have time for questions here. Thanks, Yusra, for all your help there.
No, thank you for being patient with me, Arla, and thank you to our audience for being patient through these technical difficulties. Well, thank you, Kevin, Manu, and Arla, for this very important information. Onto the Q&A session. If you have any questions to our audience, if you have any questions, please input them in the question box. Our first question is, in your opinion, why do people find it to be a good experience to work from home, especially that you've mentioned, Kevin, that there's no evidence of productivity loss? So how is it that there's no productivity loss, and why do they like it so much?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things going on. One is that people tell us they're much more efficient, so they're getting a lot more done, and that is partially explaining the productivity loss. Another finding that came out sort of pre-pandemic is that people like working at home so much, they will work longer hours to make sure everything gets done. So they work into the evening because they don't want to lose the privilege of working at home. So that's another angle on this, that they won't let productivity slide because they don't want to lose the benefit of working at home. And I think people like working at home because of some of the things Arla mentioned. You know, pants don't matter. You can go to work in sweats. You don't have to commute. You don't have to commute. You don't have to engage in any of the hassles of getting to work and getting home. You just show up to your workspace and do what you need to do. And it's not as structured in the sense that, you know, I work at home, so I can go for coffee anytime I want. I just walk out to the kitchen, right? And when I'm at work, it might be more regimented.
And the other thing,
yeah.
Please go ahead, Arla. Sorry about that.
Just to add to that, I was thinking is the aspect, Kevin, you mentioned before about the distractions as well. So individuals who before pandemic had experience working at home or had the flexibility, who were probably working at home part-time, and that a lot of what I hear them saying is that they go home to get work done that they can do on their own, that is better if somebody isn't knocking on their door every 5 minutes and asking questions. So there's a lot of work, you know, people putting together reports, doing research and piling, or doing year-end reports or financial statement. It's best if they're just kind of, you know, them and their computer or their files and getting through that. And then if that blend, and again, this is what we see as sort of people's preference, is that then they go in so that they can engage in the team, and they can, for the things that are discussing and maybe some brainstorming and working out sort of longer term aspects.
Thank you so much. Those are great points. And then Manu, you mentioned earlier that it's the responsibility of the employer to accommodate sometimes. So we were curious about what are the limitations, what limitations do leaders have or do leaders encounter when accommodating employees?
Yeah, I think, I mean, it's planning too, right? And how are we going to plan with all these things? Because pandemic just hit us, and everybody had to accommodate all those kind of things. But I think it's, as a leadership, like it's strategic. One of the things we did was, like, everybody has desktop computers. Luckily for us, we moved into laptops just in December of 2019. We removed all the desktops and moved into laptops. So that helped us during the pandemic, because everybody at least had a laptop. So it's strategic in one way. The other way is how accommodating and willing you are too as a leader. Because if you want the productivity to increase, you need to provide those resources to your employees. You can't say that this is one laptop, I want productivity. No, maybe I'll provide you a monitor. I will provide you extra keyboard so that you can be more, you can be in a good posture and sit properly, and don't be worried about your, the health side of the things and psychological effects of the things, and be prepared for that. I think it's strategic. As I mentioned, like, if everybody's at office, the amount of budget, I mean, as a leader, I would say that the amount of budget you would spend on coffee or snacks in the pantry, and the amount of time people would spend talking with each other, the decrease in the productivity time, all that money or the budget, you can say, the value you can give, you can get more value by providing the employees with the resources that they need. And that's what Arla was speaking to, right? Like how to provide them the resources, look for what resources they need. Now, some of the team, the employees may ask for a keyboard. Some of them may ask, just no, all I need is a desk, or all I need is a chair. But cater them individually, what works for them, and then supporting them, and your productivity would improve. I think the morale would improve, the engagement will increase, and yeah, and we can go through this pandemic very easily.
Thank you so much, Manu. If there's no addition from our other panelists, can you tell us about the duties to accommodate? So what are the duties of employers in terms of accommodations, what they must do and what they don't have to do?
I can add, there's the, like, we have B4, or I didn't know if someone was going to jump in, but B4 is there's bona fide occupational requirements. So what do people need to do their jobs, and then their duty to accommodate individuals to help them do their job, and then legally up to a point of if they claim the organization can't do it because it's going to be create an undue pressure on them, on the organization. So if individuals, as you were saying, as Manu was saying, talking about, especially when we get into aspects of physical health and well-being, is they do have that obligation to provide workspaces and events. Where it gets challenging is that it's never, the organizations are saying they didn't decide to have at-home offices, and they're not sure if they can afford, everybody's at-home office. So I think there's going to be test cases here if it continues on in terms of how much can our organizations have to accommodate in individual homes. And I think I saw Kevin jump.
No.
Okay, on that. Does that go to your question?
That makes sense. Absolutely. Thank you, Arla. And our next question is, so some companies were not cloud-based, for example, had been forced to change that and adapt to remote work. Are you aware of any major changes or structures like these that companies and organizations had to implement to remain effective?
I mean, I can speak from my own experience here, maybe before Arla or anybody, Kevin, can jump in. For us at our organization, we used to use servers previously, like internal servers and etc. And then we moved into cloud-based computing. And as I mentioned in my previous comment too, we got lucky in one way because we were planning with laptops and everything and moving into cloud computing. That's a game changer for us, because now even our front desk administrator, like a receptionist or who receives the calls, just before the pandemic hit, we were trying out an app that can allow us to even call remotely from our computer. And so when that happened, we all were able to continue with our services as smooth as possible. I think technologically we need to be looking in advance and see what can work. Like one of the things we are looking at is authentication, two-factor authentication, and all those things, because with all this technology also comes the IT security issues, privacy issues, etc. And talking about duty to accommodate, the previous question too, like duty to accommodate may also include like somebody who is having challenge in utilizing the technology. So how to provide training for that one individual or two individuals who need more hands-on training on how to use the technology is also a responsibility from their employer. So yeah, I think it's an interesting scenario. It's adapting, evolving, and growing as a organization. Anybody has something to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just add to that. I think there's been a lot of innovation in organizations as they adapted quickly to a new reality. And my favorite example is again our own university. We have a suite of desktop programs that are installed on every computer in the university, and it has always been impossible to get those installed on your own laptop or something like that. And then virtually overnight, We have a new cloud-based service that provides access anywhere to all of this software, statistics software and things like that, that runs on either a Mac or a PC, and I've been using it. It runs almost seamlessly. And you know, this dramatic change really just overnight, something that was impossible to do, suddenly became something that we needed to do, and then it became available.
Certainly. Thank you for that. And then our next question is, so it's hard to assess the level of stress, mental health and struggles of remote teams. Do you have any recommendations or on ways to make these types of assessments?
So how to assess the sort of the mental health of your team members?
Yes.
Well, I guess, you know, my favorite answer to that is it's an ongoing. So it's not something that you do every 4 months and just check in. It's those regular check-ins so that I know. And Kevin has done a lot in his team. They do stuff on mental health. What's your mental health training?
Yeah, mental health awareness training.
Awareness training. Thank you, MHAT.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they've always said with that, whether you're in person or not, is do you see differences, right? If do you see differences in your team? Is there a member that has changed? And there's all of these warning signs. It can be a little more difficult when you're doing remote if you are not checking in. But if you're checking in on a one-to-one basis as well as a joint, like as teams, you can tell, or if you know what their normal baseline is, you have some indications. So I like that as kind of as a keeping in touch with them. But I also you can do something more formal and just do mental health awareness surveys of them and just check-ins in terms of how are people doing, so that they're taking their own mental health baseline and getting them to report back.
Yeah, and there is a trick that psychologists use. It's a highly protected trick that I'll teach you. When you want to know how someone's doing, you can simply phone them or Zoom them and say, "How are you doing?" Yeah.
As simple as that.
As simple as that.
And what we've talked about though is it takes more conscious effort when you're doing it remotely.
Yeah.
So if you're passing somebody in the hallway, you can kind of say, oh, the signs of maybe depression is a lack of self-care, or they're isolating themselves. The isolation is a little bit hard because we're all isolating ourselves right now. But if you see somebody in the hallway at work, you can make some of these assumptions, or you can kind of delve into it. Now you have to actually make it more explicit, and you need to have schedule the weekly check-ins as a team or individual, and really say, how's everybody doing this week? And it might be on a one-to-one because people might not want to share in a group, and just say, how are things? What do you need? What can we do for you? I always encourage leaders, like, again, with or without a pandemic going on, is to regularly checking in and just asking, what is it that you need to do your job this week? And how are you doing? And what do you need?
Thank you so much, Arla. And then, so work-life balance, you said that work-life balance is about individuals. So what can individuals do to create this work-life balance besides talking to their employers? Sorry.
So I think, and what I mean by it comes down to the individual, is it really you get to define what is a good balance for you within some parameters, right? If you're, if you think a good balance is only working 5 hours, a week, but you're getting paid for 40, your employer probably isn't going to be happy with that. But if you engage in that, and it's more in terms of the integration. So I know some people who they get up early, they start work about 7, they'll put in about 5 hours, and then they like having a couple of hours, sort of an extended lunch break to either, you know, do errands, go for a walk, enjoy the sunshine, which is sometimes rare in Nova Scotia, and then, you know, and get everything ready because they have young kids, and get that set up, and then do, you know, their other 3 hours later on. So for them, working in the evenings is the best, and they have the flexibility in their jobs, and their employers allow that, and that works well for them. So that is we would say that's a good balance and works for them. You have to kind of set up in terms of, again, you know, and Kevin said you have to, you know, be careful that you're not spilling over into the family time, because you think you need to somehow make up for working at home as a privilege. But yeah, identifying, you know, sort of what is that ideal for you? What does it look like? How, where, when you want to work, and what you want to do in terms of your home life and non-work life.
I would like to add to that, as a leader, you know, like leaders should also have the discussion with your team members, like what works for you. Like my team one of them starts at 5:30 in the morning, and some of them end at 5:30 in the evening. Again, it's flexibility. Is it possible during this time? I think the work from home situation actually enhanced that possibility that you can work based on your preferences in one way. But at the same time, even coming back to work, you need to have the discussion and say, okay, what are your timings? Of course, if there is a particular thing where you want everybody to be there, that's a different discussion you can have. But have your discussion. And as Arla mentioned previously, also it's about you should have regular catch-ups. Like if 2 weeks is more, if you didn't have a catch-up with one of your team employee, don't it should be regular and often. And as Kevin said, just ask, how are you doing? The first thing, like just ask, how are you doing, and what can help out to make your work-life balance easily. How are your pets doing? How are your kids doing? Are you moving your houses right now? Just inquire, how is it going, and show that empathy. I think we need more of empathy too to balance that.
And then following your question, Yusra, and you know, they're saying what can they do for themselves? I think it's sometimes that aspect too. Sometimes our work-family conflict comes from ourselves because we think we need to do everything. And I always gave the example of you know, and this is like this was from personal example, friends and family who, you know, they're up till 1 in the morning baking cookies for a school bake sale, that they think they have to do that. And, you know, I said, just give them $20. Just, that's more than you're gonna get from your cookies, and it's saving you time, and maybe they're even gonna be happy because some of these people have tasted their baking. I said, just make it easy. But they have in this mind, in order to be a good mom and a good part of the community and all that, they have to be involved in that. So I think we really need to take a step back and think about our values and what's important to us, and differentiate between, you know, the tasks that we need to do and the tasks that we feel that others dictate that we should do. And work-life balance is a lot about getting rid of those should to things and keeping in the want to and the have to aspects.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we can wrap it up with our final question, which is, so what do you think leaders can do to support self-care during this time? I was going to. Sorry, I'll just follow up with the second part of the question. So how do you recommend they open up this dialogue with them as well?
Excellent. So the one thing, when we have a model kind of healthy workplaces and leaders influence on employees that way. So there's several things that we can do, we suggest, and part of it is like lobbying for the resources so that people can do they're not overloaded and they're trying to do stuff without the resources. We talk about modeling in terms of role modeling. There again, it gets a little bit, so if they're role modeling sort of the importance of self-care, and they're saying, you know, that sometimes I struggle, but this is what I do, and I do try to take, and it's okay to take a break at lunch. They don't necessarily have to role model all of it, but I guess that acceptance of, you know, it's good to ask for help, and it's and there's lots of good things in terms of your physical and mental health that you can do. Even I have some workplaces and some organization I know where, you know, they bring it up in those team meetings, you know, once a month, and just saying, you know, remember, you guys need anything and I'm here. If you don't want to come talk to me, we also have all of these resources. We have their EFAP, you know, that you can turn to. And really, when it becomes a part of the culture of the organization, that the employees come first, that we care about your health first, and then everything else flows from that, those are the ones that are being more efficient at supporting their employees' self-care.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this comprehensive answer. And thank you, Manu, Kevin, and Arla for this very compelling webinar and extensive information. We really appreciate your time. And to our audience, thank you for your support and participation. Immediately following the webinar, you will be directed to the evaluation survey. We greatly appreciate your input on our webinars as well as suggestions for future topic areas. Our next webinar is a panel webinar on social stigma during COVID-19. It will be held on Wednesday, January 27th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, 2 p.m. Eastern time. The webinar will be presented by Dr. Andrew Zito, Director of the Campus Mental Health Strategy at the University of Calgary, and Dr. Liz Horvath, Manager at the Workplace Mental Health at the Mental Health Commission of Canada. All of our webinars are created for public access and supported by voluntary donations and memberships. Thank you again for your participation, and thank you immensely, Manu, Kevin, and Arla. Have a wonderful day and stay safe.
Thank you very much, Yusra.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin and Manu, for interesting talks.
Thank you all.
Guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yusra.
Keep stretching, keep moving. Thank you.
My computer sitting on my magazines, my stack of magazines.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Manu. My whole life, my mother has told me to stop fidgeting. Now you're telling me I can fidget.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I actually give that as an example for kids. Like, actually take example of the kids in school. Like, you know, they keep fidgeting. That's good, because you can't sit in one position for a long time because it stresses. So wonderful. Yeah, keep moving.
Neck is in like seizure right now from this. And I keep thinking, oh, I know. It's bad.
True.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
you
you
for ending on such a positive note. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.